In a remote area of Canada's Northwest Territories lies a place surrounded by mystery and legend. This place is known as the Nahanni Valley in the Nahanni National Park Reserve, also known by some as the Valley of Headless Men. Reaching Nahanni is not easy and can be a challenge for even the most experienced adventurers. It can only be reached by bush plane, boat, or a long, grueling overland hike through tough, rugged terrain and wilderness. Over the decades, many unfortunate travelers and explorers have gone missing, or they turned up dead under strange circumstances. With its breathtaking natural beauty, geography, abundant and diverse flora and fauna, Nahanni Valley was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978. Due to its remoteness, Nahanni Valley has remained largely untouched over the centuries. The first Europeans to reach this area were fur traders expanding into the region in the 18th century, and further expanded with Alexander Mackenzie's exploration of the Mackenzie River, also known as Decho, by the Dene people. John MacLeod, a fur trader with the Hudson's Bay Company, was the first recorded European to venture into the Nahanni region in the year 1823. Historically, the lands around the Nahanni Valley were home to the indigenous Dene people, who settled here around 10,000 years ago. Dene tradition tells us that the Nahanni Valley was once inhabited by a nomadic, warlike tribe called the Naha. Naha warriors often raided Dene settlements in the lowlands as they descended from the mountains. They became the main foes of the Dene people and were greatly feared. The Dene state that the Naha people simply vanished suddenly, ceasing their raids and disappearing. Mysteries surround the Naha, but no trace of them has ever been found. The Dene mostly stayed away from the valley as they considered it an evil place. The ones that did venture into the valley to search for food would return to tell stories of the evil spirits that could make men vanish. Legend also tells of hairy man-eating giants known as Nakani. They dwelled in the caves during the day and came out at night to hunt. Most believe that these tales were nothing more than myths and fictional stories. The mysteries surrounding the valley didn't just come from these stories and tales, though. Several deaths and disappearances in the early to mid-1900s within Nahanni Valley fueled even more mystery. Most of these occurred along the South Nahanni River. There are 4 main canyons that line the South Nahanni River. Prospectors numbered them as they traveled up the river. The 4th canyon, also called Paint-It Canyon, begins with the stunning Virginia Falls. Located in Funeral Range, the 3rd canyon has long slopes instead of steep, flat walls. Big Bend marks the end of 3rd and the beginning of 2nd Canyon. It runs through the Headless Range. Here you will pass by the Gate and famous Pulpit Rock. In the 1st canyon after Dead Men Valley, the walls are the highest and most vertical. These are Canada's deepest river canyons, up to 1,200 meters deep. During the Klondike Gold Rush and shortly after in the early 1900s, many prospectors wanted to test their fortunes outside the Yukon and head out to the other parts of the remote Canadian wilderness. Among those men were Willie and Frank MacLeod, Métis brothers. Sometime around 1905, 2 years after their first trip, the MacLeod brothers and an engineer named Weir disappeared up the South Nahanni. They were never seen alive again. In 1908, 3 years after the MacLeod brothers' departure, Willie and Frank's younger brother, Charlie, formed a search party and headed up the South Nahanni. After several days, Charlie and his crew made a horrifying discovery. On a flat stretch of riverbank known afterwards as Dead Men Valley, there were the decapitated remains of Willie and Frank MacLeod. Their heads were nowhere to be found. The 3rd man, their companion Weir, was missing and never found. There were many theories. Some spoke of rival prospectors killing one another, while others attributed the deaths to wild animals, and others stated the indigenous of the area left the headless corpses as a warning to other trespassers. One source, an early publication by Maclean's magazine dated March 15, 1947, states that the MacLeod brothers' headless bodies were not really headless at all, but in fact they were identified by remnants of hair on the skulls. Legend has it that the lost MacLeod mine, where the 2 brothers found their fortune, still remains hidden somewhere in the valley. Then there was Martin Jorgensen, a Yukon prospector who entered the Nahanni Valley in 1917 in search of lost gold. He vanished and his headless corpse was found near the mouth of the Flat River, the main tributary of the South Nahanni. As was the case with the MacLeod brothers, Jorgensen's head was never found. The charred remains of his log cabin were nearby. Were Jorgensen and the MacLeod brothers all murdered for the gold that they had discovered? Another discovery, a World War I veteran named John O'Brien was found hunched over a pile of tinder with a matchbook in his hand in the winter of 1922 near Dead Men Valley. It was as if he had frozen to death trying to light a fire. In 1926, a woman named Annie Lafferty went missing. In the valley near Flat River, she got separated from her hunting party and got lost in the wilderness and disappeared. Several months later, an indigenous man reported seeing the woman climbing a hill while naked, seemingly out of her mind. In 1927, another body was discovered in Nahanni, belonging to a man nicknamed Yukon Fisher. Known as an outlaw and a prospector, he was sought by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for several years before he died. Quite close to where the McLeod brothers' bodies were found in 1908, his skeleton was found on the banks of Bennett Creek. The cause of his death has never been determined. One prospector, named Angus Hall, lost his way ahead of his party in 1928 and was never seen again. Then, in 1931, another body was found. This time it was that of Phil Powers. In the ashes of his cabin, his charred remains were found. His death was attributed to a faulty stovepipe by the RCMP, but many did not accept this theory. Most believe he was likely murdered and his cabin set on fire. There are so many others that simply disappeared without a trace. Bill Epier and John Mulholland, another pair of prospectors, disappeared in 1936. Many years were spent searching for them, but they were never found. All that was found was the burned-out remains of their cabin. Frank Henderson discovered gold in the Nahanni Valley in 1946 and returned safely with 30 ounces of the precious metal, but his colleague John Patterson vanished from the area not long after. When he failed to meet Frank at Virginia Falls in June 1946, he was reported missing. Frank Henderson is quoted as saying, "There is absolutely no denying the sinister atmosphere of that whole valley. That weird continual wailing of the wind is something I won't soon forget." One of the latest strange disappearances happened in 2005 when David Horsey and Frederick Hardesty went to stay in a friend's cabin near the North Nahanni River on June 12, 2005. 4 days later, the friend returned to find the men had vanished. The same day, they were reported missing and the RCMP started a search that ended about a week later. The men, for some reason, left the cabin without any firearms, and the firearms were still in the cabin, and there was plenty of food. The RCMP at the time said they saw no foul play at the cabin, but it was later stated that firearms were discharged inside the cabin. There were bullet holes all over the place. On June 27, 2005, David's body was found in thick forest about 2.3 miles away from the cabin. A member of the search team said David had burns on his hands and arms. The area was searched several times before the body was found. Then, on July 8, 2005, a search team found the body of Fred floating in the North Nahanni River about 12.5 miles away from the cabin. It was an area searchers had already covered several times. This case still remains unsolved. In winter, the Nahanni Valley can be very inhospitable. With the freezing cold, it can claim the lives of the most experienced outdoorsmen. But in the warmer months, this valley transforms into what some people call almost tropical, with lush vegetation. Hot springs run throughout the valley, adding to its mystery by creating thick, mysterious mist. This sparked legends of a mystical tropical valley hidden somewhere in the Nahanni. There are legends of prehistoric animals, mostly bones of mastodons and ancient bear dogs. Many say these animals still inhabit the deepest and most remote parts of the Nahanni. Some also say the valley is home to a wolf-like creature known as the Wahila. The mysterious creature is believed by some to be an ancient carnivorous mammal known as the bear dog, which is believed to have gone extinct about 8 million years ago. Others claim that the physical description of Wahila is closer to that of the dire wolf, a prehistoric relative of the modern timber wolf. The valley is also a hotspot for sightings of strange moving lights and UFOs. The indigenous Dene have avoided the valley for centuries, claiming that it is haunted by evil. Others claim that the valley is the entrance to the so-called Hollow Earth, dotted with caves and subterranean caverns that are mostly unexplored. A discovery in an ice cave known as Grot Valerie found the ancient skeletons of roughly 100 doll sheep. It is thought they somehow got trapped and starved around 2500 BC. The details of all these stories possibly get exaggerated over the years, and as time goes by, it becomes more difficult to determine what is fact or fiction. The stories of lost gold, headhunters, and creatures in the forest might just be myth, but we do know that up to 44 people have either died or disappeared within the valley starting in 1908. Strange disappearances and deaths are also too common in other national parks and wilderness areas around the world. So what is really going on in the Nahanni Valley? Was it the territorial Naha tribe who have claimed all those lives protecting their land? Feuding prospectors trying to protect their claims and fortunes? The harsh and inhospitable remote wilderness? Or possibly there is some truth in the existence of something more supernatural? The mystery remains.